Commodore, my 64, my Commodore 64.
From the moment you knew what cars even were, you dreamed of getting behind the wheel of an F1 racer. The sights, sounds, and smells of the racetrack beckoned. While your friends dreamed of fighting fires or playing outfield for the Toronto Blue Jays, your imagination was elsewhere. Majestic city buildings blurring past in Monaco, the merciless desert wind in Urama, or feeling the G-forces bite through the brutal hairpins at Brands Hatch. Delivering on those dreams was the promise of Pitstop and Pitstop II, a pair of groundbreaking racing games from Epyx released in 1983 and 84. These weren't just tests of reflexes, they were among the first racing games to treat driving as a systems problem. Strategy mattered, endurance mattered, and pit management really mattered. Together, these ideas produced that were, at the time, the most realistic racing games available, and they helped lay the foundation for decades of racing games that followed. So put on that racing suit, fasten those 6-point harnesses, and make sure to run a clean test lap as we drive into the story of Pitstop on the Commodore 64. Driving games have always been popular. Electromechanical classics like Speedway were gobbling up coins at the dawn of the gaming era, and with the arrival of the microprocessor in the 70s, the number of racing games exploded. Companies like Atari, Sega, and Taito filled bars, arcades, and smoky restaurants with racing cabinets as millions of players channeled their inner Mario Andretti. By the early 80s, arcade hits like Pole Position were dominating the charts and setting expectations for what a racing game could be. And that momentum only grew with the rise of home consoles and personal computers. It was into this competitive landscape that Epyx decided to enter the race. Founded in 1978 as Automated Simulations, the company built its reputation on role-playing and strategy titles like Temple of Apshai and Starfleet Orion. These games were critically well received, but they were also relatively slow-paced, in part due to their basic base game engine. To help distinguish faster, more action-oriented projects like Sword of Fargoal, the company began using the Epyx name as a product label. By 1983, internal disputes and mounting financial pressure led to major changes, including the arrival of Michael Katz as CEO and president. Under Katz's leadership, the company pivoted towards action and sports-focused titles, a shift that was formalized when Automated Simulations officially adopted Epyx as its corporate name. Among the projects Katz pushed for was a racing game that didn't just put players behind the wheel, but also made them responsible for managing pit stops. To develop it, Epyx partnered with Action Graphics, a Chicago-based consultancy and game developer. They were a spin-off from the arcade company Bally, who mostly created ports and clones of popular arcade games. Pitstop was their first big original. They ran with Katz's concept and created versions of it for the ColecoVision, Atari 8-bit systems, and of course, the Commodore 64. The 64 version was handled by Jamie Fenton, then known as Jay, best known for designing and programming the arcade classic Gorf. All three versions were released in November 1983, and the game was an immediate success. Alongside hits like Jumpman, Summer Games, and Impossible Mission, Pitstop helped propel Epyx back towards profitability in 1984. With Pitstop's success, Katz had seen everything he needed. A sequel was immediately greenlit. And it didn't start off well, which historically speaking is a very authentic racing experience. As with the original Pitstop, development was outsourced, and the results were not to Epyx's liking.
Terrible! Awful! I hated it!
Eventually, they pulled the plug on the third-party developer entirely, handing the project to Steve Landrum with less than half the original schedule remaining. No pressure. One of the biggest challenges was how to handle the all-important split-screen gameplay. Split-screen on the 64 is notoriously difficult, especially when you're doing full-screen redraws, like what happens when a player enters the pit. But while experimenting with different color modes, Landrum stumbled onto something unexpected. By enabling multicolor and extended color modes together, something you would never normally do, he found a way to blank the screen just long enough to rebuild the pit stop view off screen. To the player, it looks like a natural transition. Behind the scenes, it prevents the lag and screen tearing that would otherwise have plagued the game. It was a brilliant accident, and it made the most critical part of Pitstop 2 work smoothly and reliably. Despite the shortened schedule, development wrapped successfully and Pitstop 2 was completed on time. Released in late 1984, it reviewed extremely well and became one of Epyx's most respected Commodore 64 titles. It charted consistently and earned a reputation as one of the system's best competitive games, a status it has largely retained ever since. Together, Pitstop and Pitstop 2 showed how quickly a bold idea could evolve into something great. In just over 2 years, barely enough time to reach an alpha build on a modern AAA game, Epyx delivered 2 of the Commodore 64's most iconic racing titles. Pole Position was one of the biggest arcade hits of the early 80s, generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue and dominating the charts almost immediately after its 1982 release. It quickly set the standard for what fast, forward-facing arcade racing was supposed to look and feel like, and for a while, just about everyone followed that template. Not surprisingly, that influence is all over Pitstop. Both Pitstop and Pitstop 2 place the camera behind the car with the track rushing towards the player. Pitstop 2 lowers the angle slightly, but the most obvious difference between the two is its split screen layout. At a glance, the racing itself feels very much like Pole Position. You're chasing lap times, weaving through traffic, and trying to keep the car under control. Of the two pit stops, the second is the more accomplished racer. Corners demand more careful handling, and the lower camera angle and animated scenery give it a stronger sense of speed. But this is where the similarities with Pole Position end. Pole Position is designed for a quick quarter gobbling fix, where fiery deaths occur if you so much as nudge another car. Pitstop, by contrast, is in it for the long haul, valuing stamina and strategy over pure reflexes. After all, rubbing is racing, and in Pitstop, it happens a lot.
No, he didn't slam into you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Bumping into other cars or even clipping the edge of the track wears your tires down, and tire damage is one of Pitstop's most iconic and rage-inducing features. The effect is a little more subtle in Pitstop 2, but the system works the same way in both games. As you race, your tires cycle through a series of colors from dark blue to orange, until finally, boom, race over. To avoid that, you need to regularly pull into the pits, which brings us to Pitstop's most famous mechanic, the pit stops themselves. The pit lane opens at the start of each lap, giving you a chance to leave the track and make critical decisions, replacing worn tires, topping up fuel, or both. Once you pull in, the game shifts into a brief mini-game where you take control of the pit crew, and timing is everything. Strategy matters here. Do you change all 4 tires or just the worst ones? How much fuel do you really need to finish the race? Every skipped task saves precious seconds, and a perfect stop makes you feel like a conductor of a grease-stained symphony. Push your luck too far though, and your opponent will laugh all the way to the finish line. The strategy extends well beyond the pits. Some of the tensest moments come from deciding whether to risk one more lap on damaged tires or a nearly empty gas tank. It's innovative, rewarding gameplay, and both games offer a deep racing experience, especially with a friend. And that's where Pitstop 2 really shines. Multiplayer in the original supports up to 4 players, but it's strictly 1 at a time. Pitstop 2 limits things to 2 players, but it's head-to-head split-screen racing. There's nothing quite like seeing and hearing your friend creeping up behind you in a hairpin, or the humiliation of blowing a tire and being forced to sit helplessly at the side of the track while your gloating chum finishes the race. You know who you are. Both games feature a variety of tracks and racing modes. The original includes 6 circuits inspired by real locations like Monaco, Albi, and Mont-Tremblant. Pitstop 2 leans further into authenticity, with more faithful recreations of tracks like Watkins Glen, Brands Hatch, and Hockenheim. Taken together, the variety of tracks, modes, and skill levels provides a surprising amount of depth and replayability. Personally, my preference is Pitstop 2. It feels like an improvement in nearly every way, but both games remain genuinely fun, and few things are as satisfying or as cruel as racing a friend all the way to that checkered flag. From an audio-visual perspective, both releases are everything they need to be for a racing game. The cars look like cars, they sound like cars, and everything moves quickly and smoothly. That said, this is where the two games begin to diverge. The original Pitstop very much feels like an early Commodore 64 release. Even with the occasional tree or roadside sign whipping past, the tracks feel sparse, the menus are bare-boned, and the pit crew sound effects are extremely rudimentary. It sounds like a video game, which to be fair it absolutely is, but it doesn't quite sell the fantasy of being in the pits. I do love the buzz of your opponents rushing past though. Pitstop 2 on the other hand looks and sounds exactly how a racing game should. The cars are bigger and beefier, and the track audio is sublime, capturing that high-octane whine of the racetrack far better than its predecessor. And the tracks look better too. The red and white curbs add a touch of realism and speed, as does the background scenery. That added polish carries over in other areas too. The tire changing sounds in the pits feel spot on, and the overall presentation just feels more what you'd expect from a racing game. If I had to put a number on it, I'd give the original Pitstop a 6 out of 10 for graphics and sound. Perfectly serviceable, but not pushing any boundaries. Pitstop 2 though earns a very solid 8 or 9. Combined with the refined gameplay, it pushes the experience from feeling like you're playing a racing game to feeling like you're actually at the race. Minus the smell of fuel and the tinnitus. The Commodore 64 Appreciation Society absolutely adores the Pitstop series, and we're definitely not alone. When Pitstop was released, Compute called it one of the most realistic and playable racing simulations available. A few years later, a 1989 issue of Commodore User awarded it an impressive 81%, calling it one of their all-time favorite games. But while the original Pitstop was well received as a solid and innovative racer, Pitstop 2 was something else entirely. Upon release, Zap64 awarded it a huge 95%, describing it as a superb racing game and memorably noting that it was like playing two improved pole positions, one on top of the other. Computer and Video Games followed suit with a 9 out of 10, calling it the best Formula One racing game since Pole Position. That reputation has endured. Even today, Pitstop 2 sits among the highest ranked Commodore 64 games of all time. It currently holds an 8.4 rating on Lemon 64, placing it just outside the site's top 100. The original Pitstop doesn't fare quite as well by modern standards, currently sitting at just under 7 on Lemon 64, which, if I'm being honest, is about where I'd place it too. Taken together though, these two releases represent one of the most successful 1-2 punches in Commodore 64 history. They're great racing games, but that's not what they're most often remembered for. The Pitstop series introduced genuine strategy into the racing genre. You weren't just driving a race, you were managing it. In that sense, they're conceptual ancestors of the modern sim racers we play today, proving early on that players wanted more than a pure test of reflexes when they got behind the wheel. And for those of us who grew up with them, Pitstop and Pitstop 2 remain some of the most vivid memories on the Commodore 64. Sitting beside a friend, sweating, and often swearing, through an arm-straining, joystick-damaging race of endurance, desperately trying to squeeze every possible second out of a pit stop, and then laughing as one of us was left behind in the dust, was pure exhilaration. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. And do you have any memories of playing Pitstop on the 64? Drop them in the comments. Hope to see you again.